Hi guys. I finally finished section 2 of the book India, Bharat and Pakistan by advocate Sai Deepak, and this section has 3 chapters that take up about 158 pages, and it talks about the period between 1899 to 1909. And the chapters are called The Partition of Bengal, that is 1899 to 1905. The next chapter is called The Story of Moderate Nationalism, Muslim Nationalism and Electoral Separatism, which is the years between 1905 to 1909. And the final chapter of section 2 is called The Indian Councils Act of 1909, Yet Another Ad Hoc Safety Valve. And this chapter analyzes the events between 1907 to 1909. Now, it's called Yet Another Safety Valve because, as you all hopefully know by now, that the Congress Party was made by Alan Octavian Hume as the first safety valve. And so the Indian Councils Act was yet another safety valve. Since these aren't the things we are taught in school by the Congress historians, some of you all probably don't know this stuff yet, so for those of you, here's a short explanation. The Congress Party was basically created by the British themselves as a way to give a platform to the angry Bharatiyas who were beginning to assert themselves and starting to demand varying degrees of autonomy from the British. This was done basically keeping in mind that another situation like the revolt of 1857 had to be avoided at all costs. So, better to give the natives a voice that will be kept under control than not listening to them at all, which might end up making their voices uncontrollable. Kind of what Congress does with the communists when they are in power. By the way, the Muslim participation in the revolt of 1857 was heavily and extremely harshly criticized by people like Sir Syed Ahmed Khan, which has been described in the second chapter of this book, which I have also reviewed, and you can find the link for that at the end of the video. Writing this review was very challenging because I am tempted to simply tell you everything that I discovered here instead of giving you my thoughts on the book. And I don't want to do that because I want you to buy the book and let the publishing ecosystem know and keep in mind that these thoughts, these scholarships are what we want to keep on consuming. The main takeaway of this book is that you keep reading one shocking thing after another, and so like I said even in my review of section 1, that this is not going to be your casual reading companion, travel buddy while you are traveling, or the proverbial curled up with a good book in a nice evening scenario. This is a serious book, demands serious attention and concentration, but more importantly, demands serious contemplation from your side. In that sense, you could call this book very interactive. Now, I'm not judging people who finished reading this book in a few days, because maybe they were familiar with the material beforehand, or their intellect may simply be superior and more fast-paced than mine. But I would argue this book needs to be read slowly. At one point I was reading, well, to be precise, I was able to read only 2 or 3 pages in every sitting. And here's the reason for that, which is also the biggest difference between this book and Sai Deepak's last book, India, that is Bharat. See, plenty has been said about the difficult language of India, that is Bharat, right? What I'm saying is that in that book, the word choices, sentence construction, and some terminology were the only difficult things. I would say that as a Hindu, I don't think you would have difficulty in understanding the basic concept or the core concept of that book, because I can basically explain that entire book in one line. Angrez chale gaye, Angreziyat nahi gayi. But in this book, India, Bharat and Pakistan, the case is 180 degrees the opposite. The language is much easier, lucid, smooth sentence constructions. But where Sai Deepak will test your dedication is that this time, the concept, the analysis of the incidents that occurred, his findings, those are the real complexities in this book. If it takes you maybe half an hour to read 3 pages, it will take you about 3 days to contemplate on that material because there's so much dense information and shocking findings jam-packed in those 3 pages. And I understand that different people have different reading skills and academic rigor, but honestly, I think you would be able to read through this book casually and easily only if you have a master's level humanities or social science education, and that too only in English. But wait, that doesn't mean you cancel your plans of reading this book just because I said that. Because remember, I'm talking about finding this book easy, and there's plenty of adjectives between easy and impossible, okay? I myself don't have a master's degree in humanities, and so I will just have to put in a little more effort than others, and that's all. And you should be open to the idea of putting in that extra effort of reading this book because you cannot afford to miss out on the information discovered by Sai Deepak. It is going to recontextualize your entire understanding of Bharatiya politics. Everything that you know about Indian history, that you think you know, Indian political history, you are going to rethink it or re-understand it. Or you can read it when it releases in your language, especially in Hindi, Tamil. These are the languages this book is definitely going to release in sometime later. like India, that is Bharat. Another slight controversy surrounding this book that I want to comment on is that this book is apparently less of J. Sai Deepak's writing and instead more of quoting other people. I have absolutely zero problems with that. In fact, I think it's better this way, and here is why. Look, I get it that as a fan of J. Sai Deepak, you want to feel that same powerful charisma and opinions that you see in his speeches while reading this book as well. And frankly, you do get that while reading this book, but in a different way. This book is what I would call more academically valid, as opposed to his first book where he drew conclusions and gave his opinions while mentioning things like scholars have said or scholars agree, etc., but without immediately going on to quote the scholars themselves. And that doesn't go down too well with people in academia. And before you say that, screw the academia, I would ask you to face the practical situation that the liberal arts academia is here to stay, and it's best if we get our foot in the door instead of dreaming that the house along with the door will one day burn down. So, J. Sai Deepak has repeatedly quoted scholars from their papers published in reputed university journals and presented excerpts from speeches and letters by various politicians in different contexts, and then he has drawn conclusions and basically has connected dots and given all these findings a very focused direction. And I seriously hope he keeps up this style of writing in his future books as well. And a slight warning for people from non-academic professions, you may find the language of the letters written by various important people to each other to be pretty difficult because again, people with different kinds of academic training write differently. So do not be discouraged. Take as much time as you need. Read a phrase or sentence multiple times, which is what I have had to do. And then get on with it. Or simply comment on this video to start a discussion about any particular concept or portion that you didn't understand, and me and my viewers will be happy to clear your doubts. And also, do not feel frustrated about not being able to remember every shocking detail you read about in this book. Just use sticky notes for the page you found something fascinating, like I've been doing. Write down the shocking point in 2 or 3 words in that sticky note, and be happy that you can get to revisiting that point anytime you want, especially to use that point while destroying someone in a debate. And now, a few major realizations I had from reading this section of the book. Point 1. The Marxist claim that casteism led to adoption of Islam by Hindu Bengalis in this Bengal region, that has been debunked thoroughly. Point 2. The active and conscious effort to desanskritize the Bengali language has been pointed out here, which is actually going on even today. Bengali speakers of Bharat will know that the Bengali spoken by Bangladeshis today is an absolute joke. And frankly, the only thing left for them to do is to start writing words and sentences from the right hand side. And I do not find anything wrong in Bengalis of the Middle Eastern settler community trying to desanskritize the Bengali language because they are intelligent enough to understand the beautiful nexus between language and faith, and consequently, language and identity. It is the dumb, suicidal Bengali Hindu I have a problem with, who does not understand this fact and happily accepts those distorted versions of Bengali, and also keeps babbling about English being the lingua franca of Bharat. Additionally, the reluctance of Middle Eastern settler colonialists in taking part in English language education for those very reasons has also been pointed out. Point 3. Destroying the nationalism propagated by Hindu Bengalis was a priority of the British, and especially Lord Curzon. Point 4. I have heard all my life that RSS are sympathizers, are British sympathizers, Savarkar was a British sympathizer, etc. But I had no idea that no one was a bigger British loyalist and sympathizer than the intellectuals from the Middle Eastern settler community. Point 5. Probably my biggest realization from this book so far, and one which makes this book a must-read for Bengalis especially, is that the nationalist movements of those times was significantly Bengali and very consciously Bengali Hindu in nature. Growing up, I have always been under the impression that, Bengal has had its fair share of freedom fighters just like any other part of the country. But I had no idea that it was very much a Bengali movement to begin with. And this part, I think, has been deliberately and successfully suppressed by Congress historians because those Bengalis were fierce and proud Hindus. They repeatedly kept referring to gods and goddesses like Durga, Kali, Bhavani, Jagadhatri, and pointed out the Shakta nature of a larger section of Bengalis while calling for drawing blood of their enemies. Which brings me to my next realization and point 6, that is, the significance of Sri Aurobindo Ghosh. Not knowing this much about him pisses me off the most. Growing up, I had always been under the impression that he was just another random revolutionary who later gave up guns and became a nice spiritual guru and gave life advice. This book points out that he was at the forefront of every so-called extremist or basically nationalist action of those years, and the only reason his name was not taken with the famous Lal Bal Pal is probably because that phrase has a nice ring to it, And Sri Aurobindo's name just doesn't fit into that rhyming thing, Lal Bal Pal. Take it from me, guys. In every context, you have heard the names of Lal Bal Pal. From now on, you have to keep in mind that it's always Aurobindo plus Lal Bal Pal in all of those situations. His revolutionary past was probably suppressed also because both Congressy historians and modern day suicidal Bengali Hindus don't want his countless comments on the anti Hindu nature of the Middle Eastern settler colonialists to come to the forefront. So, I, as someone who is parallelly almost halfway into the book The Life Divine by Sri Aurobindo, which is basically a gist of all Hindu texts, I feel like this section was in a way a biography of Sri Aurobindo. Point 7. You and I have always been given the impression that the only difference between moderates and extremists was that the moderates wanted freedom through non-violent means like unarmed processions and petitions, while the extremists wanted freedom through violent means. Well, that is 100% a lie. Moderates, for the most part, not only did not want independence, in fact, they actively criticized and made fun of those that did. And since Rashtraguru Surendranath Banerjee is a big name in Bengal and even has a famous college named after him, it has been especially disheartening and embarrassing to read the exact extent to which he and Gopal Krishna Gokhale were opposed to independence. They were opposed to independence. So basically, only and only the extremists wanted independence. The British and the moderates opposed that idea because they believed India has no future without the help of the British. And the Middle Eastern settler colonialists opposed that idea because, according to them, living under the rule of Christians was preferable than living under the rule of indigenous Hindus. And point 8. Sai Deepak had mentioned at one of the book launches that after reading this book, your heroes will change. Just like his heroes have changed while researching for this book. And that has been my experience with the book so far. You people need to read this book for the writings of two phenomenal Muslim intellectuals called Syed Amir Ali and Syed Ali Imam. Unless you read their works, or at least the ones mentioned in this book, you won't understand the brilliance in their clarity and intellect and also the nuance in their position as Muslims. Which is basically that they don't hate Hindus personally, they are happy to have Hindu friends. They just want what's best for their community. And you tell me who has succeeded more at this? Syed Amir Ali, Syed Ali Imam, or suicidal Hindus whose biggest dream is to reform some Hindu ritual or the other every morning. For no other reason except keeping this video as short as justifiably possible, I will end my list of shocking realizations here, but rest assured, there is plenty more, which I hope you will read and find out yourself. So I hope you will pass on this video to people who are starting this book or are planning to start this book or are even looking to revise this book after already having read it. Thank you. And now, shocking quotes from Surendranath Banerjee. I am loyal because I am patriotic, because I feel in my heart of hearts that with the continuance and indeed the permanence of British rule in India are bound up the best prospects of Indian advancement. And here is Surendranath Banerjee condemning violence. We men of the Congress are the best friends of peace and orderly government. We denounce violence. We condemn violent methods, for we believe in our heart of hearts that order is the first condition of political progress. We, the men of the Congress, true to ourselves, remain firm in our allegiance to those principles which gave birth to the Congress movement. Now, as of old, we raise aloft the banner of constitutionalism, on which are engraved in characters of light words the, quote, devotion to the British Crown and the sacred interests of our country, end quote. Now, as of old, we wish for the permanence of the British rule.